6 months passed since the human fleet appeared over Valorian worlds and chose mercy over destruction. The Galactic Council tried to continue as normal, but nothing was normal anymore. Every day brought new problems that all traced back to the same cause. Humanity was gone and the systems they had built were failing. The Korath agricultural worlds were in crisis. Their soil optimization systems, all designed by human companies, had stopped receiving updates. Crop yields dropped by 40%. Famine threatened 3 billion Korath citizens. The Korath government sent urgent requests to human territory, begging for help. The humans responded with a simple message. We no longer maintain council systems. However, species interested in joining the Terran Concordat receive full technical support. The Zenthari faced similar problems. Their mining operations in the asteroid belts relied on human drilling AI. Without updates and maintenance, the systems were breaking down. The Zenthari economy, built on mineral exports, was collapsing. They sent delegations to human space. The humans gave them the same answer. Across council space, the pattern repeated. Medical facilities couldn't treat certain diseases without human nanomedicine. Ships couldn't maintain their human-designed fusion reactors. Communication networks were failing. The council had built their civilization on a foundation that humanity provided, and now that foundation was crumbling. The council held emergency sessions every week. The debates were always the same. Some representatives wanted war. They argued that humanity had sabotaged council infrastructure and must be forced to restore it. Others pointed out that war had been tried twice and both times ended in complete disaster. A third group suggested the unthinkable. Maybe the council should apologize and ask to rejoin humanity's good graces. Apologize? The Vrax ambassador stood, his forearms gesturing wildly. Apologize to them? They abandoned the council. They let our systems fail. They are the ones who should apologize. Ambassador Keleth of the Zenthari looked tired. She had aged visibly in the past months. They didn't abandon us. We abandoned them. When their colony was massacred, we chose politics over justice. They simply stopped pretending we were worth their time. Reports from intelligence agencies made things worse. Human activity outside council space was increasing rapidly. They were settling new worlds at an incredible rate. They were making contact with species the council had never encountered. Trade routes were being established that bypassed council space entirely. Humanity was building its own network, its own sphere of influence, and they were doing it without any input from the council. More disturbing were the reports from species that had established contact with humanity. The Kelvarians, a small species that the council had always treated as insignificant, sent a message that spread through council channels like fire. The humans offered us technology-sharing agreements, mutual defense pacts, and equal representation in their concordat. They gave us in one meeting what the council promised for decades but never delivered. We are joining the Terran Concordat and withdrawing our council participation. Within a month, 5 more species followed. They didn't formally leave the council, they simply stopped coming to meetings. They stopped paying dues. They redirected their trade to human-aligned routes. The council was hemorrhaging members, and everyone knew why. Humanity was offering what the council had always claimed to provide, but never actually delivered: fair treatment, genuine partnership, and real security. The Korath were the first major species to break. Their people were starving. Their government had no choice. They negotiated with humanity and joined the Terran Concordat. Within days, human agricultural specialists arrived on Korath worlds. The soil optimization systems were updated with newer, better technology. Crop yields didn't just return to normal, they exceeded previous records. The Korath had been suffering for months, and humanity fixed their problems in weeks. The Zenthari followed a month later. Then the Pelthians, then the Gorvash cluster worlds. Species after species looked at their failing systems, looked at the council's inability to help, and made the obvious choice. The council's membership dropped from 47 species to 16 in less than a year. The council chambers, once filled with hundreds of delegates, became empty and echoing. The remaining species were either too proud to admit they needed help, too isolated to be affected, or too committed to the old ways to change. They passed resolutions condemning humanity's predatory recruitment practices. They declared that species joining the Terran Concordat would face sanctions. But everyone knew the truth. The sanctions meant nothing. The council had no power left to enforce them. Then came the delegation. The council's senior leadership, including representatives from all 16 remaining species, agreed to what once would have been unthinkable. They would go to human space and negotiate. They would offer everything: technology sharing, reparations for Kepler 442b, a permanent human seat on the Security Council with veto power, anything humanity wanted. The goal was simple: get humanity to rejoin the Council and restore the old order. The delegation traveled for 3 weeks to reach New Terra, humanity's new diplomatic station. It orbited a beautiful blue world that humans had terraformed from a lifeless rock in just 30 years. The station itself was enormous, larger than the Council's central hub. Ships from dozens of species moved around it. Humans, Korath, Zenthari, and many others the Council delegates didn't recognize. Ambassador Chen met them in a conference room with windows overlooking the planet. She looked the same as she had during her last Council appearance, calm and professional. But there was something different in her eyes. Not anger or hatred, something colder: indifference. The delegation's leader, a Vrax named Kelthum, began with formal apologies. The Council recognizes that mistakes were made in the handling of the Kepler 442b incident. We should have acted more decisively. We should have stood with humanity in your hour of need. Chen nodded but said nothing. Kelthum continued, growing more nervous. We come today to offer full restitution. We can offer technology exchanges, open trade agreements, and a permanent seat for humanity on the Security Council. We can even arrange tribunals for those responsible for Kepler 442b. The Council wants humanity to return. Chen listened to the entire presentation without interrupting. When Kelthum finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her words were like ice water. You came to us when we needed you, and you gave us committees and delays. We came seeking justice for our dead, and you gave us politics. Now your systems are failing, your members are leaving, and suddenly you remember we exist. You don't want us back. You want our technology. You want our expertise. You want us to fix the mess you created by building your entire civilization on infrastructure you never bothered to understand. Kelthum tried to respond, but Chen raised her hand. Let me be clear. Humanity is not interested in rejoining the Galactic Council. We don't need your trade routes. We don't need your technology. We don't need your approval or your recognition. We have built something better, and we did it without you. But, Chen continued, her voice softening slightly, we are not your enemies. The Council may continue to exist if that's what you wish. We have no interest in destroying it. Any species that wishes to join the Terran Concordat will be welcomed. Those who don't will be left alone. We will not force anyone to join us. She stood and walked to the window. However, you need to understand something. The era of the Council as the center of galactic civilization is over. We are now the guarantors of peace and security in this region of space. Any species that threatens civilian populations, human or otherwise, will face consequences. Any species that needs help and asks for it in good faith will receive it. This is not negotiable. This is simply how things are now. The delegation sat in stunned silence. They had come offering everything, and humanity had simply said no. Not out of anger or revenge. They said no because they genuinely didn't need the Council anymore. Ambassador Kelleth, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. What should we tell the Council? What should we tell the people who are watching this? Chen turned from the window. Tell them the truth. Tell them that humanity spent 150 years trying to be good Council members. We contributed technology, defended Council worlds, participated in your culture. We did this because we believed in what the Council claimed to represent. But when we needed you, you showed us that those ideals were just words. She walked back to the table. We didn't destroy your Council. We simply stopped pretending we needed it. You can continue as you are, or you can change and become what you always claimed to be. That choice is yours. But humanity has moved on. The meeting ended. The delegation returned to Council space. They delivered their report to an emergency session. The words were difficult to say, but they said them. Humanity didn't hate the Council. They didn't fear it. They were simply done with it. They had built something better and invited everyone to join. The Council could exist alongside it or not. Humanity didn't care. Over the next 5 years, 11 more species joined the Terran Concordat. The Council continued to exist, technically. They still held meetings. They still passed resolutions, but everyone knew the truth. The observer ship limped back to Council space 3 days after the massacre. Inside, the representatives from 12 different species sat in shocked silence. They had watched 500 Valorian warships turn into clouds of burning metal in less than an hour. The recordings didn't lie. The sensor data was clear. Humanity had weapons that turned the galaxy's most powerful military fleet into debris. When they arrived at the Council chambers, emergency sessions had already begun. The Valorian representatives were demanding answers. Where had the humans gotten such technology? How had they hidden it for so long? The observers played their recordings. The entire council watched in silence as human weapons platforms, each the size of a small moon, unleashed hell upon the Valorian fleet. They were already there, one observer said quietly. Those platforms weren't new. Our analysts examined the energy signatures. Some of those structures have been in place for over 80 years. The humans have been building this since before they joined the council. The chamber erupted in chaos. Questions flew from every direction. The council's intelligence director stood and called for order. Over the next week, his agency compiled a report that changed everything. The humans had been hiding their true capabilities from day one. Every technology they shared was decades behind what they actually possessed. Every military exercise they participated in, they held back. Every treaty they signed about military limits, they had already surpassed before signing. They made fools of us, the Valorian High Commander said, his face purple with rage. They sat in these chambers and pretended to be weak while building an empire in secret. This is a betrayal of everything the Council stands for. Ambassador Kelleth of the Zenthari rose slowly. She was old, one of the few who remembered when humans first arrived. Perhaps, she said carefully, we should ask ourselves why they felt the need to hide. What did we do that made them trust us so little? The Valorian commander slammed his fist on the table. They killed 500 ships. 500! This cannot stand. The Council must respond with force or we lose all credibility. The Council split into factions almost immediately. The Valorians wanted war. They called for a full military mobilization of all Council species. Humanity had shown themselves to be a threat to galactic peace. They must be destroyed before they grew stronger. 6 other species, mostly military powers that had always resented humanity's growing influence, agreed. The second faction urged caution. They were led by the Korath and the Zenthari, species that depended heavily on human technology. You want to attack them? The Korath representative asked. With what? Half our ships use human power systems. Our agriculture relies on human terraforming. Our medicine uses human designs. They're not even attacking the systems and we're already falling apart. The third faction said nothing. They simply began fortifying their borders and hoping humanity would leave them alone. For 3 months, the debate raged. Meanwhile, the consequences of humanity's departure became impossible to ignore. Medical facilities across Council space were failing. Ships couldn't be properly maintained. Agricultural output dropped on dozens of worlds. The humans had integrated themselves so deeply into Council infrastructure that their absence was catastrophic. Then the Valorians made their decision. With support from 6 allied species, they began assembling the largest military fleet in recorded history. 2,000 warships, 50 dreadnoughts. They would overwhelm the humans through sheer numbers. The Council officially condemned the action, but everyone knew the truth. They were allowing it. They wanted to see what would happen. The fleet took 2 months to assemble. During that time, the Valorians made their intentions clear. They broadcast threats across all channels. Humanity would be crushed, their worlds would be occupied, their technology would be seized. The upstart species would learn their place. Ambassador Chen responded with a single transmission that was only 10 seconds long. You were warned once. You did not listen. What happens next is your choice. The fleet entered human space at 7 different points simultaneously. The Valorians had learned from their first disaster. They wouldn't bunch up in one system where human weapons platforms could destroy them easily. They would spread out, divide human forces, and strike at multiple colonies at once. For 30 minutes, nothing happened. The Valorian ships advanced deeper into human territory, sensors sweeping for threats. Then human ships appeared. They were smaller than the Valorian dreadnoughts, sleeker and faster. Each one was only a tenth the size of a Valorian capital ship. The Valorian commander smiled. Even if human ships were more advanced, the numbers were overwhelming. 2,000 against maybe 300. The battle began, and the council observers, once again watching from safe distances, saw something that would haunt them forever. The human ships moved in ways that defied physics as the council understood it. They made tiny jumps, disappearing and reappearing within combat range. They fired weapons that bent around obstacles to strike their targets. Their armor rippled and flowed like liquid, repairing damage faster than the Valorians could inflict it. But the truly terrifying part was the coordination. The human ships fought as a single organism. When Valorian forces tried to surround a human ship, 3 others would appear behind them in perfect formation. When the Valorians concentrated fire, the targeted ship would vanish and another would take its place, already firing. It wasn't a battle. It was a dance, and the Valorians were stumbling through steps they couldn't follow. In 4 hours, 1,000 Valorian ships were destroyed. The rest began to retreat. Then something changed. The human ships stopped firing. A transmission went out on all frequencies. Ambassador Chen's face appeared on every screen. "Surrender now," she said calmly. "Return to your homes. This ends here. Continue fighting, and we will follow you back to your worlds and finish this where your civilians can watch." The Valorian High Commander, watching from his flagship in the home system, responded with rage. "Valorian honor does not permit surrender. All ships continue the attack. Show these humans what true warriors fight like." The human ships resumed firing, but now they did something different. Instead of destroying the fleeing ships quickly, they disabled them. Engines were taken out with surgical precision. Weapons were melted with targeted strikes. Ship after ship was left drifting, powerless but intact. The crews were alive. They could see everything. When half the fleet was disabled and the other half in full retreat, the humans kept their promise. Human ships engaged their FTL drives and followed the Valorians home. Council observers tracked them through hyperspace. The humans weren't chasing scattered ships. They were heading directly for Valorian home space. The Valorian High Command watched their sensors in growing horror as human ships began appearing in orbit. Not just over the homeworld, over every major colony, every military installation, every population center. The humans had struck simultaneously at 24 worlds. Billions of Valorians looked up at their skies and saw human warships hanging there like executioners' axes. The High Commander waited for the bombardment to begin. His people had attacked human colonies. They had killed millions of human civilians. By every law of war, humanity had the right to retaliate in kind. The Valorian military mobilized what few ships remained in home space, knowing it was futile. But the bombardment never came. Instead, every screen on every Valorian world showed the same message. Ambassador Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, Earth shining blue and beautiful in the background. When she spoke, her voice was calm and cold. "People of the Valorian Empire, your leaders attacked our civilians. When we sought justice, they attacked us again. You now see what we could do. Every ship above your worlds carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet. We could end your species in minutes, but we choose not to. We choose mercy, not because you deserve it, but because we are better than your leaders. Remember this moment. Remember that you live because we allowed it. The choice was ours, not yours." The human fleet remained in position for 6 hours, long enough for every Valorian to understand how completely they had lost. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, the human ships vanished into FTL. They left the Valorian Empire intact but utterly broken. The council observers sent their reports back immediately. The assessment was unanimous and terrifying. Humanity hadn't just won a military victory. They had demonstrated psychological warfare at a level the council had never seen. They had shown overwhelming force, then shown mercy in a way designed to maximize humiliation. They had proven they could reach any world at any time, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop them. The Valorian Empire collapsed politically within a week. The High Commander was removed from power. The government that replaced him immediately sued for peace. The 6 species that had allied with them quickly distanced themselves, claiming they had been misled, and the council sat in their chambers, looking at the reports, understanding with growing horror what they faced. Humanity wasn't just stronger. They were playing a completely different game, and the council didn't even know the rules. Ambassador Kelleth spoke what everyone was thinking. "We didn't lose them because they were weak and we were cruel." The Valorian Fleet Commander, Admiral Theknor, watched his tactical displays with satisfaction. 500 warships moved in perfect formation through human space. The largest military force assembled in recent galactic history. Behind him, Council observers monitored everything, their presence ensuring the operation remained within acceptable boundaries of warfare. "Sir, we're detecting a single human vessel ahead," reported the sensor officer. On the main view screen, a small ship appeared. By Valorian standards, it was barely a frigate. Admiral Theknor checked the identification. The vessel was named the Ambassador's Regret. An appropriate name, he thought, for humanity's last chance to surrender. "Open a channel," he ordered. The human captain appeared on screen. He was young, perhaps in his 30s by human standards, with dark skin and calm eyes that showed no fear. He sat in a command chair that looked utilitarian compared to the ornate bridge of the Valorian flagship. "This is Admiral Theknor of the Valorian Imperial Fleet. You are in violation of galactic security. Surrender your vessel and transmit coordinates for all human military installations. Comply or be destroyed." The human captain smiled slightly. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the Ambassador's Regret. I have one message for you, Admiral. Turn back now while you still can. Cross the boundary behind me, and you will not survive." Several of the Valorian bridge crew made sounds of amusement. One small ship against 500. The human was either brave or insane. "Your bravado is noted," Admiral Theknor replied, "but ultimately meaningless. Stand aside or be destroyed." Captain Rodriguez nodded as if he had expected nothing different. "Then we're done talking. Remember, you were warned." The Ambassador's Regret activated its faster-than-light drive and vanished. The Valorian fleet continued forward, crossing the boundary into the deeper regions of human space. Admiral Theknor ordered the fleet to spread out in standard invasion formation. Sensor sweeps showed no human ships anywhere nearby. Perhaps they had retreated, recognizing the futility of resistance. 10 minutes passed. The fleet moved deeper into the system, approaching what intelligence suggested was a major human colony. Still nothing on sensors. No defending ships, no warning signals. Just empty space and distant stars. "Admiral, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures," the sensor officer said. His voice carried a note of uncertainty. "They're very faint, scattered throughout the system. Define unusual." "I don't recognize the pattern, sir. It's not matching any known drive signature or weapon system in our database." Admiral Theknor frowned. Before he could order a deeper scan, space itself seemed to shimmer. The stars wavered like reflections on disturbed water. Then shapes began to emerge from the darkness. At first, the Admiral thought they were asteroids or small moons that had somehow been missed by initial scans. But as the visual feeds resolved, he realized these objects were artificial. They were structures, massive beyond anything he had seen before. Each one was the size of a small moon, covered in geometric patterns that might have been weapon ports or sensor arrays. "How many?" he asked quietly. 47 platforms detected so far, sir. Still counting. They're appearing all around us." The Council observer, a Xanathi named Krell, moved closer to the tactical display. "Those energy signatures. Run an age analysis." The sensor officer complied. A moment later, his scales paled. According to the energy decay patterns, some of these structures have been here for over 50 years. 50 years. The humans had been building weapons platforms in secret since before they joined the Council. While they smiled and traded and played by Council rules, they had been constructing a defensive network that could hide from every known sensor system. The Valorian fleet had walked into a trap that had been set decades ago. A transmission came through. Ambassador Chen appeared on every screen across the fleet simultaneously. She was no longer in a diplomatic office. She stood on what was clearly a warship bridge surrounded by displays showing tactical information that made the Valorian systems look primitive. "Admiral Theknor," she said. Her voice was perfectly calm. "You brought 500 warships into our territory to threaten 30 billion human lives. Under human military doctrine, that constitutes a declaration of total war. You will now learn what that means." "We outnumber you," the Admiral said, though he no longer felt confident. "Surrender your weapons and we will be merciful." Chen tilted her head slightly. Admiral, we haven't activated our weapons yet. What you see are automated defensive platforms. Our actual fleet is elsewhere, but these will be sufficient. She gestured to someone off-screen. Fire. The platforms opened up simultaneously. What happened next was not a battle. It was an execution. The weapons were unlike anything in the Council's database. Directed energy beams that ignored shields entirely, burning through Valorian armor like it was paper. Kinetic projectiles that accelerated to nearly the speed of light, hitting with the force of small nuclear weapons. Missiles that seemed to predict where ships would move, intercepting evasive maneuvers before they were completed. Admiral Theknor watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated. Ships exploded in cascades of fire. Debris clouds expanded where proud warships had been moments before. He ordered return fire, but the Valorian weapons barely scratched the human platforms. The armor seemed to absorb or deflect everything they threw at it. "Retreat!" he shouted. "All ships, emergency jump to rally point 7. But the platforms had positioned themselves to cut off escape routes. Every time a Valorian ship tried to activate its faster-than-light drive, human weapons would fire at the exact moment of transition when shields were weakest. Ships that tried to flee died just as quickly as those that stayed to fight. The Council observers watched everything, their recording devices capturing every moment. Krell, who had seen warfare across a dozen species, found himself unable to speak. The efficiency of the slaughter was terrifying. The humans were not angry or chaotic. They were methodical, precise, clinical. They destroyed the Valorian fleet the way a surgeon removes a tumor, with complete control and no wasted effort. In 47 minutes, 500 warships were reduced to scattered debris. Only one ship remained intact, the observer vessel that carried Krell and the other Council witnesses. It sat untouched in the middle of the carnage, its shields down, its weapons cold. A message appeared on their communication system. "Council observers, your recordings have been noted. You will be escorted to the boundary and released. Return to your governments and tell them what you saw. Tell them what happens when they mistake human patience for human weakness." A small human ship, sleek and fast, appeared near the observer vessel. It did not threaten or posit weapons. It simply waited. Krell gave the order to retreat. As they fled the system, he could not stop reviewing the sensor logs. The weapons technology was decades ahead of anything the Council possessed. The tactical coordination was perfect. The platforms had operated with a level of artificial intelligence that suggested the humans had solved problems the Council's best scientists said were impossible. But the thing that truly terrified Krell was not the technology. It was the restraint. At any moment during that massacre, the humans could have destroyed the observer ship, could have killed the witnesses, could have ensured no one reported back. But they didn't. They wanted the Council to know, wanted them to see exactly what humanity was capable of. The ambassador's regret was waiting at the boundary. Captain Rodriguez appeared on screen again, his expression unchanged. "Safe travels, Observer Krell. I hope your report will convince your leaders that further aggression would be unwise." Krell managed to speak. "How long have you been preparing for this?" Rodriguez smiled. "Since the moment we joined the Council, we hoped we would never need these defenses. We hoped the Council's promises were real. But humans have a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We prepared very thoroughly." The observer ship crossed back into Council space. Behind them, the human platforms continued their silent watch, guardians of a territory that had just proven itself far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. On the Council's central station, Quillon received the first reports from the observer vessel. The floating being read through the data 3 times, hoping to find some mistake or exaggeration. But the sensor logs were clear. The video footage was undeniable. The Valorian Empire's mighty fleet had been annihilated in less than an hour. Emergency sessions were called. Delegates demanded explanations. Military advisors tried to analyze the human weapons and found themselves unable to explain half of what they saw. Species that had mocked humanity's departure now fell silent. Those that had considered attacking humans themselves quietly canceled their plans. But the real shock came when intelligence agencies finished analyzing the platform's energy signatures. The structures were old, some dating back 70 years, before humanity joined the Council, before they made first contact with most galactic species. The humans had found the Council, studied them, and decided to join only after building defenses that could destroy any threat the Council might pose. Humanity had never been the naive junior species everyone assumed. They had been the most dangerous predator in the room, pretending to be harmless until the moment they chose to reveal their teeth. The evacuation happened faster than anyone expected. Within 24 hours of Ambassador Chen's announcement, human personnel began leaving Council facilities across the galaxy. They moved with efficiency that surprised the alien species watching. There was no chaos, no angry protests, no dramatic scenes. Humans simply packed their belongings, closed their offices, and departed. On the Council's central station, a Korath administrator watched as the human medical team prepared to leave. The humans had run the station's primary hospital for 70 years. The Korath had always assumed they did it because they needed the prestige and the credits. Now, watching them disconnect their equipment and seal their research, he realized he had been wrong. They had done it because they were good at it and because they had believed in helping others. Dr. Martinez, the Korath called out. Please, can we discuss this? The hospital serves thousands of species. We need your expertise. Dr. Martinez was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. She had saved countless lives on this station. She looked at the Korath with something that might have been pity. You don't need our expertise. You need our equipment and our techniques. Those belong to humanity and we're taking them home. But the patients will be fine, Dr. Martinez interrupted. Your own doctors are capable. They just got comfortable letting us handle the difficult cases. She sealed the last container. You should have thought about this before your council decided that human lives were worth less than political convenience. The Korath watched her leave, unsure what to say. Around the station, similar scenes played out. Human engineers, traders, teachers, and technicians all departing. The aliens they left behind felt the first stirrings of unease. The second wave of realization came 48 hours later. Across Council space, systems began to fail. Not catastrophically at first, just small problems. A medical scanner that displayed an error message. A fusion reactor that required a software update that would not download. A communications relay that suddenly could not connect to certain networks. On the Xanathi mining colonies, the automated drilling system stopped working. The machines that had operated flawlessly for decades simply shut down. Every screen showed the same message in a dozen languages. License expired. Contact manufacturer for renewal. The Xanathi mining director tried every override code he knew. Nothing worked. He attempted to contact the human corporation that had built the systems, but their offices were empty. The communication channels that had always been open now returned automated messages. This service is no longer available. In the agricultural zones of the Korath hegemony, the soil optimization systems failed. These systems had been installed by human terraforming companies 30 years ago. They analyzed soil composition and adjusted nutrients automatically, allowing the Korath to feed their growing population. Without them, crop yields began to fall immediately. The pattern repeated across Council space. The humans had not just worked in Council facilities. They had built infrastructure, developed technologies, and integrated their systems into the foundation of galactic society. For 150 years, they had been sharing their innovations, licensing their patents, and maintaining their equipment. Everyone had assumed this would continue forever. Now, with humanity gone, the galaxy began to understand how dependent they had become. Quelon called an emergency council session 1 week after the human departure. The floating chamber was tense. Representatives from dozens of species presented reports on the failures cascading through their territories. The numbers were staggering. 34% of our medical technology was human-designed or human-maintained, reported the Xanathi representative. We're experiencing equipment failures across all major hospitals. A delegate from the Sorel Confederacy spoke next. Our agricultural output has dropped by 40% in systems using human terraforming techniques. Without the optimization algorithms, we're facing food shortages within months. More reports followed. Communication systems failing, power generation dropping, transportation networks experiencing delays. The scope of human integration into Council society had been invisible when it was working smoothly. Now that it was gone, the gaps were impossible to ignore. The Valorian delegate sat silent through all of this. His species had deliberately avoided using human technology, preferring their own systems even when they were less efficient. He had thought this made them independent. Now he wondered if it had just made them blind to the danger humanity represented. "We need to bring them back," said one delegate. "Offer them whatever they want. Full council membership with voting rights, access to restricted technologies, reparations for the Kepler incident." "It's too late for that," another voice argued. "They made their choice. We should focus on adapting to their absence and developing our own replacements for human technology." Quellen's tentacles moved in the pattern that indicated deep concern. "Our intelligence agencies have been monitoring human space. The reports are disturbing. A holographic display activated showing surveillance data from the borders of human territory. The images showed construction on a massive scale. Shipyards, defense platforms, facilities that dwarfed anything the council had built. "How long have they been building this?" someone asked. "Based on the energy signatures, some of these structures are decades old," Quellen explained. "They were cloaked using stealth technology we didn't know existed. The humans have been preparing for this scenario for a very long time." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had not impulsively left the council in a fit of anger. They had planned for it. While they smiled and cooperated and contributed to council projects, they had been building an alternative. The technology they shared had been obsolete by their standards. The military capabilities they reported had been deliberately understated. The humans had been playing a long game, and the council had never realized they were in a competition. "What do we do?" asked a junior delegate from a smaller species. Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. Security alerts flashed on every screen. Something was happening at the Valorian border. The Valorian delegate received a priority message and his scales changed color, a sign of extreme agitation in his species. "A fleet has been detected entering our territory. 500 ships under Valorian command supported by allied species. They're heading toward human space." Quellen's translator device made a sound of alarm. This was not authorized by the council. "Who gave the order?" The Valorian delegate straightened, his confidence returning. "The Valorian High Command acted independently. Humanity has proven itself a threat to galactic stability. We are moving to neutralize that threat before they become more dangerous." "You're starting a war," Quellen said. "We're ending one before it begins," the Valorian corrected. 500 warships, including our most powerful dreadnoughts. The humans may have hidden bases and new technologies, but they cannot stand against the might of the Valorian Empire. We will force them back to the negotiating table and ensure they understand their place in the galactic order. Other delegates began voicing support. Species that had suffered from the human withdrawal saw an opportunity for revenge. Those who feared human technological advancement saw a chance to eliminate the threat. The council, which claimed to be an institution of peace, watched as its members prepared for war without any attempt to stop them. Quellen tried to restore order, but even the council speaker's authority meant little now. The fragile unity that had held the council together was cracking. Some species wanted to punish humanity, others wanted to appease them. A few were quietly considering whether they should leave the council themselves and seek better terms with the humans. On the view screens, the Valorian fleet moved deeper into human territory. The ships were impressive, built with technology refined over thousands of years of warfare. They outnumbered any human force the council had observed. The Valorians were confident this would be a quick victory, but watching the displays, Quellen felt something the floating being had rarely experienced in a long life of diplomacy. It felt fear. The humans had hidden so much for so long. They had prepared for this exact scenario. They had walked away from the council without hesitation, as if they had always known this day would come. What else had they prepared? What other capabilities had they kept secret? The council had dismissed humanity as a junior species, technologically advanced but politically naive. They had assumed human cooperation came from need rather than choice. Now, watching the Valorian fleet advance into the unknown, Quellen wondered if the council had made a terrible mistake. Not in failing to help humanity after Kepler 442b, though that had been wrong. The real mistake might have been in never trying to truly understand what humanity was capable of. The Valorian admiral sent one final message before his fleet entered. The system where the first human defensive Positions had been detected. His words were broadcast across all channels, meant to demonstrate Valorian strength and human weakness. Humans, you have violated the peace and stability of the Galactic Council. You will surrender your military assets and return to Council authority, or you will be destroyed. You have 1 hour to comply. The chamber was silent except for the soft hum of translation devices. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the center of the massive room, her dark suit a stark contrast to the colorful robes and exotic forms of the alien delegates surrounding her. Above her head, holographic images floated in the air, showing scenes that made even the most hardened diplomats look away. The images showed a human colony world called Kepler 442b, or rather, what was left of it. The recordings captured the moment when Valorian warships appeared in orbit without warning. They showed the bombardment that followed, the cities turning to ash, the desperate evacuation attempts that failed. The biological weapons came next, released into the atmosphere. The cameras mounted on emergency satellites captured everything until they too were destroyed. Sarah's voice was steady as she spoke, but her hands gripped the edges of the podium. 2.3 million people died in the attack. Among them were 400,000 children. The Valorian Empire gave no warning. They made no demands. They simply came and killed everyone they could find. She gestured to the evidence displayed around the chamber. We have 43 separate recordings from different sources. We have chemical analysis of the biological weapons used. We have testimony from the 17,000 survivors who managed to escape. The evidence is clear and undeniable. The Valorian representative, a tall creature with scales that shimmered like oil on water, rose from his seat. His voice carried the arrogance of a species that had ruled their corner of the galaxy for millennia. The colony was built on territory that belonged to the Valorian Empire in ancient times. We have historical claims to that system dating back 3,000 years. Sarah felt anger rise in her chest but kept her expression neutral. The planet was unclaimed. The Galactic Council's own records show that no species has inhabited that world for over 5,000 years. You have no legal basis for this massacre. The council speaker, a floating jellyfish-like being named Kelon, raised one of its many tentacles for silence. The council has reviewed the evidence presented by the human delegation. This is indeed a serious matter that requires careful consideration. Careful consideration? Sarah's voice rose slightly. They murdered millions of our people. What is there to consider? Quelon's translation device made a sound that might have been a sigh. Ambassador Chen, the Galactic Council has maintained peace for over 2,000 years. We have done this by ensuring that all disputes are resolved through dialogue and proper procedure. We cannot simply rush to judgment. Another delegate representing the Korath hegemony spoke up. Perhaps both sides could agree to a temporary ceasefire while we investigate further. Sarah stared at the alien in disbelief. A ceasefire? We didn't start this. We were attacked without provocation. Our people were slaughtered. We're not asking for permission to retaliate. We're asking for justice and for the Council to fulfill its charter obligation to defend member species from unprovoked aggression. The chamber filled with murmurs and chirps, and sounds that had no human equivalent. The delegates spoke among themselves, their translator devices creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Sarah waited, watching their faces and forms, reading the body language of dozens of alien species. She had been a diplomat for 20 years, and she knew what she was seeing. They were going to do nothing. Quelon spoke again after several minutes of deliberation. The Council proposes the formation of a special investigative committee. This committee will travel to Kepler 442b, interview survivors, and collect additional evidence. They will then prepare a comprehensive report with recommendations for how to proceed. How long will this take? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. These matters require thoroughness. We estimate 5 to 7 standard years for a complete investigation. 5 to 7 years. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. In that time, the Valorians could attack again. In that time, the evidence would degrade. In that time, the survivors would be scattered across human space, their testimonies dismissed as unreliable due to trauma and time. She had seen this tactic before, used against smaller species who lacked the power to demand better. And in the meantime, she asked, what protection will the Council provide to human colonies near Valorian space? Quelon's tentacles moved in a pattern that Sarah's cultural database identified as evasion. We would encourage both parties to exercise restraint. Perhaps establishing a neutral zone would be appropriate. The Valorian delegate made a sound that his translator rendered as laughter. We have no intention of attacking further human settlements, provided they remove themselves from our historical territories. Sarah felt something break inside her. Not her composure, which remained perfect. Not her diplomatic training, which kept her voice level. But something deeper. Something fundamental about her belief in the system she had spent her career serving. She looked around the chamber at the species gathered there. Some of them were genuinely sympathetic. She could see it in their expressions. But sympathy without action was meaningless. Others looked uncomfortable, unwilling to challenge the powerful Valorian Empire over the deaths of humans they had never met. And some looked pleased seeing an upstart species put in its place. The Galactic Council had been humanity's goal for over a century. When humans first developed faster-than-light travel, they found a galaxy full of intelligent life, organized under the Council's banner. Joining had seemed like the natural next step, the way to take humanity's place among the stars. For 150 years, humans had contributed to Council projects, followed Council regulations, and accepted their position as the newest and least influential member species. Sarah had believed in it. She had believed that the Council's charter meant something, that the promises of mutual defense and justice were real. But standing there, looking at the faces of delegates who were willing to sacrifice millions of human lives to avoid an uncomfortable confrontation with the Valorian Empire, she finally understood the truth. The Galactic Council was not a force for justice. It was a political organization that served the interests of its most powerful members. And humanity had just learned that they were not among that group. Sarah reached into her jacket and pulled out a small data chip. She placed it on the podium, and it projected a document into the air large enough for all to see. The seal of the United Earth government gleamed at the top. "I have been authorized by my government to present the Council with this document," she said. Her voice was no longer pleading or arguing. It was simply informative, the tone of someone delivering news that had already been decided. "Humanity came to this Council seeking justice for our dead. You have offered us committees and delays. We came seeking protection as your charter promises. You have offered us suggestions for restraint. We came hoping that the ideals you claim to uphold were real. You have shown us they are not." She looked directly at Quellen. "Therefore, effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. All human diplomatic staff will be recalled within 48 hours. All human trade agreements negotiated under Council auspices are hereby terminated. All human contributions to Council projects and initiatives will cease." The chamber erupted. Dozens of species began speaking at once, their translator devices creating a wall of noise. Quellen's tentacles writhed in what Sarah's database suggested was alarm. The Valorian delegate actually looked pleased. Sarah continued speaking, her voice cutting through the noise. "What humanity does next is no longer your concern. We will not be bound by Council restrictions on our response to the Kepler 442b massacre. We will defend our people using whatever means we deem necessary. Any species that interferes will be considered hostile." She gathered her documents and turned to leave. The other human delegates, who had been sitting quietly behind her, stood and followed. As she walked toward the exit, Quellen called out, "Ambassador Chen, please reconsider. Where will you go? Humanity needs the Council for trade, for protection, for legitimacy in galactic society. You cannot survive alone." Sarah stopped at the doorway and looked back. For the first time since entering the chamber, she smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "You're right that we need some of those things," she said, "but we've just realized we don't need to get them from you." The doors closed behind her, sealing shut with a finality that felt appropriate. Sarah walked down the corridor with her delegation following in silence. She could feel their questions, their concerns, their fear about what came next, but she could also feel their relief. The pretending was over. Humanity had spent 150 years playing by the Council's rules, accepting their place, contributing to a system they hoped would protect them when protection was needed. That hope had died today in a chamber full of aliens who valued political convenience over justice. Sarah pulled out her communicator and sent a single encrypted message to Earth. Just 2 words, but they would set in motion plans that had been prepared for years, waiting for this moment. Execute withdrawal. What the Galactic Council didn't know, what they had never bothered to discover, was that humanity had learned to hope for the best while preparing for the worst. They were about to learn what humans did when hope ran out, and preparation was all that remained.